Want to make more money? Kangoo immediately asked Sella the location of the D-level gate. From her mouth, she learned that there was also a place filled with lizard people nearby. That sounds interesting. Kangoo will have to go there tomorrow after closing. He needs to defeat strong monsters to speed up the awakening process and earn more money to bring home to his wife. He died and brought it back to Sella. But what he was most concerned about was whether lizard meat was as delicious as chicken. After the two of them returned to the old apartment building after drinking, Sella led Kangoo into the room of the goddamn Anguy who ran away from home, telling him to feel free to use it. Having just been washed clean after 10,000 years, Kangoo's spirit was extremely bright and he sat down on the bed. Sella observantly realized that he was tired, so she immediately left, conveniently turned off the light and said, "Good night, Oppa." Kangoo waited for the door to close completely before lying down on the bed to feel this wonderful comfort. 10,000 years of just lying on the cold hard stone floor with the snores of monsters, making the silence of the night here even more precious. Kangoo comfortably closed his eyes and entered a beautiful dream, thinking that returning to Earth was indeed the right decision. The next morning, at the D-rank gate, there were hundreds of awakened people coming here in large numbers, scurrying to find people to join the team. Kangoo put his hands in his pockets and stood outside the game. He saw the familiar pleading voice of the thief boy, who looked guilty, but he ignored it. Ong Dong walked to the security check ID and entered the teleportation gate. Kangoo stepped into a forest that looked darker than the forest at gate E. Kangoo slowly moved his limbs. He slept well last night, so now he was full of energy. He lifted his legs slightly and heard the sound of crunching leaves. He immediately activated the power of silence. The next second he put his foot down, there was no more sound. In the blink of an eye, Kangoo jumped away, leaving behind a rolling and spinning transmission gate. According to the information obtained from Sella, he knew that the lizard god's eyesight was not good, but they were quite sensitive to sound. If you don't approach quietly, they will pounce on you. The beautiful girl carefully gave her instructions, so Kangoo obediently followed them from the moment she arrived here. He easily jumped into the giant lizard gods while they were unaware. It's good. His eyes lit up. The motherfucker had decided their fate with him. Yesterday Sella also provided useful information that lizard people are very afraid of fire, so fire magicians play a huge role in this regard. But why the hell does Kangoo need a magician when he can use the power of the demon Andros to unleash hellfire, causing the three lizards to run away with their tails on their necks? Their shrill screams reached the blue one's ears while the pink one had been growing for generations. The fire suddenly flared up fiercely, burning everything it touched, leaving only the pitiful screams of the monsters. One quick-witted creature fell into a nearby lake to put out the fire, but I believe that hell's fire cannot be extinguished in such a pitiful way. You must use magic to suppress it, because what it burns is not the physical body but the life force. If not discovered, in the end there will only be a corpse left for the enemy to trample on. Happy to use gluttony to collect the magic power of the lizard in the lake. Kong Ji-yu suddenly remembered that Sella's brother's group was also named Andros. They must have placed it haphazardly, but our Andros is so domineering. It can't be compared to those idiots. Kong Ji-yu was now carrying two girls in both hands, sucking up their magic power. Suddenly he heard a rustling sound behind him. He quickly glanced back and saw three lizard children come and surrender their lives. They were extremely indignant with the actions of the uninvited guest and he was smiling a little. The buffet was here. While he was pondering whether he should rush forward or not, he was interrupted by a call, causing Kangoo to turn his head to the other side to look. On the shore of the lake were a few human feet with a condescending voice. "Hey newbie, do you want to join the cockfighting club?" It sounded so itchy, so Kangoo looked at them from the bed and asked which guild this was. The guy standing in the middle seemed to be waiting for just that. The corner of his mouth suddenly tilted up. He very proudly pointed at his neck and introduced. "Hey, you're from the state of Andros. Can't you see the silver pendant is so bright it's blinding?" Quote. It's true that they hate giving what they get, and as soon as they think of this meeting, they bring themselves there. Kangoo looked disgusted and turned away, leaving behind only one word: criticism. Then he walked away, leaving behind a huge anger for the Andros group. The leader was angry and was provoked by his lover next to him, so he decided to kill that cheeky boy. After all, it had been a long time since the brothers and sisters had gone hunting to relieve stress, and the whole group of people had an unusually sinister and bloodthirsty look. He pressed his two horns together, hissed with pleasure, preparing to teach that boy a lesson. Kangoo, after brushing off his ass and leaving, went deep into the forest to destroy the lizard god. Wherever the hellfire went, they died and heard the smell of burning grilled meat and the constant screams. With just one move, Kangoo filled the lizards' mouths with onions. It seemed like there were no more lizards left here for him to kill. Going in this deep is a bit dangerous, but Kangoo wants to get there quickly, so he's thinking about taking a risk. Holding the magic stone in his hand, Kangoo was wondering what to do next when he suddenly heard a shrill call. Following inertia, he glanced over and quickly squeezed the stone to turn off the light. Looking at his expressionless face, the other man curled his mouth in a mocking face. Andros came here so quickly with the hungry leeches. The leader smiled and said he was worried about Kangoo, so he came here to look for him. But he's not an idiot. At a glance I can tell that these guys are a bunch of scum who rely on strength to oppress the weak. Exactly the type of people Kangoo hates the most in the world. He blandly said he didn't need help, but the leader stubbornly refused to hang it up. The clothes were still clean next to him and there was no body to show off to anyone. You brat. Can you stop me from doing whatever I want? Kangoo immediately responded sarcastically. Using his free time to annoy these guys would be fun. The leader quickly took the bait, began to lose his temper, lowered his voice and asked Kangoo how he dared to have such a rude attitude towards his senior. He wasn't scared at all. He shrugged and replied that it was because of the senior. It was so annoying. Kangoo's arrogance attacked his self-esteem. He angrily gritted his teeth at this dog. Kangoo's eyes looked straight at him. He said provocatively, "What? Do you want to collide, brother?" A stupid-looking blonde guy picked up a weapon and tried to rush in, but the leader stopped him. He was about to jump up and call Hojun, "Let me handle it, you're fine." Before he could finish his sentence, he was stopped by the leader. He had already thought of a way to destroy the smug look on that cheeky guy's face. Looking at Kangoo, who was so arrogant and unaware that heaven and earth were so thick, Hojun predicted that this kid was at least level B, but that was nothing at all. Hojun curled his mouth and threatened, which was exactly what Kangoo meant, so he quickly raised his hand for his father's help. Even at this point, he still despises me. The spicy Hojun tightened his grip on the sword's hilt, repeatedly hitting the sword on the armor in his hand, creating a loud, golden noise that echoed in the forest. The teammates were extremely delighted, laughing contemptuously, looking down as if understanding each other's meaning, raising their chins and asking Kangoo, "Do you know how sensitive lizards are to noise?" Kangoo tilted his neck to hear the sound of bending his limbs, then bowed his head and smiled faintly, so he shouldn't expect anything from these retards. He just let Hojun enthusiastically tap his sword, until a roar rang out, not in vain as the young man knocked until his hand fell off. When the water surface began to make big fluctuations, Hojun excitedly told his teammates to prepare some defense. He excitedly looked towards Kangoo, knowing that by his sound he could hear 100 types of lizards coming. "If you want to live, kneel down and lick my feet. Otherwise, wait for death." Seeing that Kangoo did not respond, Hojun happily thought that this guy was afraid that his tongue would fall inside. At that moment, he turned to look at the group of idiots who locked themselves in the defensive cage. Kangoo's behavior made Hojun feel guilty, wondering why this guy wasn't afraid of anything, completely different from the script he created himself. Kangoo was now mad, his eyes were more cruel than the demons. He squealed and laughed loudly, wanting to scare others. He had to at least do this. The two hands clapping together immediately activated supersonic power, creating a giant column of ultrasonic waves that echoed throughout the forest. Hojun and his daughter looked outside in shock, only to see Kangoo continuously banging his feet on the ground. The vibrations were as loud as the sound of supersonic waves. Hojun screamed out of fear. The crazy guy stopped immediately. Cold sweat started pouring out continuously. Thinking that begging would have no effect, Kangoo's feet suddenly stopped, staring at the panicked people inside the barrier, smiling a strange smile. If he noticed, he would indulge. Realizing something bad, Hojun was always worried. What the hell was that bastard doing? The answer to his question was right away. The crowd of people inside the sphere was in the sights of all the lizards in the forest. But the red eyes flickering in the darkness spread out from the deep caves in the forest. Then they flocked to the source of the sound, targeting the trembling people in the magic sphere as the target of their hovering, causing the sorceress to turn pale. Hojun was also scared but had to loudly and grumpily hold the class tightly to block the front. Seeing Kangoo outside, did he think he was so secretive that he wanted everyone to die? Unexpectedly, Kangoo jumped high without saying a word, making Hojun fearfully look after him. Kangoo sat on a high tree branch, looking down with his face showing the arrogance of a winner. You said earlier that lizards are sensitive to noise? Sorry, but I'm a bit confused about that. The lizards frantically rushed to attack the ball at the same time, making the whole Andres group scared to death. Hojun cursed in horror, saying that the other guy really wanted to kill them all. Who the hell would say such a bad thing? Since when did Kangoo want to die? The only ones who have to die here are you guys. The corner of his mouth curled up, unleashing the power of sound to blend himself with the surrounding environment. Looking at Kangoo leisurely standing on the tree as the lizards passed by him and rushed down like a storm, Hojun was speechless. Is that a sound control skill? Before I could regain my composure, I heard a scream. My teammates had their heads chewed off by lizards. Hojun angrily turned around and cursed his lover, saying that even building a barrier was not a good idea. How could I hold on when I was skewered in the middle of my body? I turned back to look at him through tears in horror. After a few hours, he died. Continuously witnessing such a terrible scene, Hojun could no longer control his body and sat down on the ground right in front of his lover's feet dripping with blood. Quickly he raised his hand to cover his mouth, preventing the horrifying scream from coming out. Suddenly the bloody head of his teammate appeared in front of Hojun. A lizard was devouring the stiff body of the blonde. Hojun had to try very hard to hold back his screams. At that moment the blonde-haired man's hand let go, dropping the long spear that had just fallen right where the leader made the sound. Even if you're dead, you can still squeeze your teammate's thighs, that's all. The effort of holding back all this time suddenly dissipated into smoke. Hojun wiped away his tears and accidentally let out a gasp that made the lizards around him bow down. He trembled and reached out his hand towards Kangoo. I begged him to save me with a weak, whispering voice. Please, I knew it was wrong. Help, save me. Looking at the palanquin guard like Hojun who had to open his mouth and whine like a dog, Kangoo with a cold face said a few words, Senior. The corners of his mouth began to curl up into a bright smile, smiling from ear to ear, adding the phrase, come home. After hearing this, Hojun shouted loudly, You bastard, there's nothing left but to cry with sadness. His face was so contorted that it was unrecognizable, tears and snot gushing out as his eyes turned white from the pain. Kangoo stood high above, looking down at the lizards that jumped into the depths and tore the cruel human's body apart. The world always operates according to the rules. If you want to fight evil, you can only use more evil. When fighting with murderous aura, you use a larger flow of murderous aura to suppress it. Kangoo just follows that. A moment later, crackling sounds rang out in the deserted forest as a huge fire burst forth. Kangoo leisurely burned the remaining lizards with the hellfire in his hand. After finishing everything, Kangoo extinguished it. Looking at the human corpses mixed with monster corpses lying haphazardly, flesh and blood mixed together, it was terrifying. After completing the preparation stage, Kangoo immediately used the gluttony skill to absorb the body first. But at that moment, the system displays a warning that he cannot use this skill on players because they are protected by the Geyer system. This name sounds familiar. It seems like Kangoo has seen the 100,000 magic core collect magic power while deducing it. So all players' bodies are protected by a system called Geyer? Kangoo looked down with regretful eyes at Junho lying cold on the ground, with a magic stone next to him. Just now, he was planning to test whether gluttony applies to players or not. If not, then that's it. Kangu exhaled and focused on draining the monster's magic power. Soon the system reported that the current index was 30. Seeing that, he forgot his previous depression, excitedly reached out to summon Hellfire and was pleased to see the quality of his magic power increase significantly. Now all I need to do is level up and it'll be both ways. Quickly removed the magic stone in front of Ho Jun, then left happily looking forward to the third awakening. 3 days later at Seola's old apartment complex, Kangu was carrying a bunch of soup and slurping it, excitedly complimenting that today's soup was still as delicious as ever. Sola. Purple hair is also used to this kind of eating and drinking, so I just asked him if he went hunting today or not. Hearing Kangu nod and say he would return home for dinner, Sola worried that he was working too hard. For the past few days, Oppa had been leaving early and coming home late without a day off. Kangu tried to change things and asked Sola about basic science while she was making tea. While pouring purple water, he said he would go to the trolls today, so he was quite worried because he didn't know if he would do well, but if he wanted to awaken a second time soon, he had to practice hard. I believe you can do it. Oppa's encouragement helped Sola become more cheerful and happily gave Kangu tea to drink, causing her to dance Vinaho's remix extremely hard inside. Suddenly Sola remembered a hot news about the gates recently, causing Kangu, who was about to drink tea, to pause for a few seconds. There were rumors that a tall player was appearing in the gate. Hearing this, his hand holding the cup suddenly shook slightly. Kangu knows that high-ranking players are the ones pretending to be ranked to attack other players. At first, he thought maybe this rumor originated from the Andros group, but Kangu himself denied it, because he was sure he had checked carefully before leaving the mixed corpses of humans and lizards. The corpses were all killed by lizards, so there was little reason to suspect that any one person had done it. But he has a careful nature, so it's best to prepare many backup plans to keep it strong and level up as quickly as possible. After many days and nights of plowing the country, the system announced that Kangu had reached level 20, resulting in his third awakening being activated. His magic had increased a lot compared to before, but this time it was clearly on a completely different level. As soon as Kangu put his hand out, the hellfire flared up strongly due to increased magic power. So it's just as Kangu predicted. Every time he awakens, the demon gate seal becomes weaker, through which magic power will always flow back into his body. The day of recovering his strength is not far away. Hi. While happily thinking about the bright future, her eyes slid into the system panel below about the activated mana hunger attribute of Stage 3 False Awakening. Players can convert the mana in real magic stones into magic power to absorb. It also sounds interesting, so Kangu immediately tried it out. As soon as he put the stone into the voracious demon's mouth, it immediately melted as if dipped in acid. Kangu could immediately feel the abundant magic power he had just loaded, equal to the magic power of a monster. Although it was a bit of a loss because of the loss of money from selling real magic stones, the magic absorption speed was doubled. Well, you can't be too greedy. After all, I've earned a lot of money in the past few days, and my account balance is also quite long. I'm in the Kangu forest and want to test my new skills a little more before returning. I need to relax a bit from time to have the strength to fight, right? Tie his shirt tightly, tilt his head up to the sky, exhale, and Kangu sits down. His eyes were cold and serious, and he suddenly jumped up to a towering height, activating the power of the sky to fly like a bird. Continuously look sideways to find the lizard boss because he wants to absorb a real, high-quality ghost stone. This godforsaken forest was both dense and dark, causing Kangu to hover above for half a day and still not see a trace of him. Boredly clicked his tongue a few times. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to use the power of exploration now? While sadly about to land, Kangu suddenly heard some familiar voices. Isn't the person who is clenching his jaw the kind-hearted Tesu? Who did I offend to get punched in the mouth like that? Opposite him was a voice cursing that you're such an idiot with overdeveloped limbs. The guy standing next to the red-haired guy who just cursed is also a mixed bag. One more thing to add is that this guy is truly tougher than a buffalo. Kangu uses the stealth technique to hide behind a tree so no one will know. If he's sad or bored, if there's drama, he has to wait. It was by chance and surprise that he saw a young man with a bloody face lying unconscious, claiming to be a thief wandering outside the gate who had been chased away by the whole village. And the person who was protecting the discriminated against person, Tesu, was now roaring, "How dare you attack my group member?" To make even a gentle person like Tesu angry, those two scoundrels were clearly telling him to keep his mouth shut. There was a lot of shouting, but unfortunately, when the lizard people landed here, they all went out to sell salt. Hiding behind a bush, Kangoo overheard a few words and understood the situation where Tesu was stupidly abandoned by her comrades. And those two guys with buffalo heads and horse faces are the troublemakers Sola mentioned. He silently clicked his tongue. It was true that the rumored high player was not him. Wondering why they were fighting each other, the red-haired guy raised his weapon and rushed straight towards Tesu. As fast as the wind, he launched a move, but Tesu used his shield to avoid it. The group's pressure was too strong to push him back. His angry face was covered with sweat. Those two delinquents were also at a loss for Tesu's toughness, so how could a second-level awakened fake be so strong? Unaware that he was clenching his fists, his tendons were rolling and he slammed the shield onto the ground to perform defense skills. The steadfast voice and determined eyes clearly told them that Tesu was standing here to fight for herself and protect the little thief. Seeing that the shield emitted a large source of energy, they guessed that Tesu had awakened with quite high attributes but had not yet reached the third time, so the gypsies were not afraid at all. Tesu frowned tightly when she heard them talking to each other. Her face was determined but mixed with worry. The red-haired boy happily licked the axe blade but was reminded by the guy next to him, but he didn't. Don't get too excited, and if you accidentally kill him, all the fun will be lost. Hearing the two guys whispering to each other like that, Kangoo was quite curious why they didn't kill Tesu. I ran here out of curiosity but saw someone I knew in distress. Looking at Tesu's exhausted appearance and enthusiasm for helping new people, Kangoo was quite hesitant about whether to help him or not. While he was busy thinking, the red-haired girl smirked provocatively. Tesu was about to block the attack, making Kangoo's eyes look like something very strange. He quickly grabbed the bushes and jumped up, as if hypnotized, and jumped into their fight. The axe that the red-haired man was holding was full of magical power, making Kangoo extremely surprised. How the hell did these poor guys have such a thing? His sudden appearance made the red hair even more excited. The more crowded, the merrier, right? The junior guy also wanted to join in. This guy is so unlucky that he knows our faces, so don't leave here. Tesu's face behind him also became dumbfounded. This face with the same careless look looked familiar. Hesitatingly tried to call the name Kangoo, right? Yet he still stuck the bait in Uncle's face, staring at the two thugs. They were excitedly discussing how to deal with Kangoo because they had met the target of capturing Tesu and the thief boy alive. The red hair hissed and laughed with joy, swinging the axe blade to the side, making Tesu look in shock, but Kangoo still stood calmly like a statue. Mr. Kangoo ran away. The red-haired guy's tongue was chasing after him with an extremely chalky smile. The axe hadn't even touched the prey's neck before it had already chosen a slap that didn't miss, causing his teammates to widen their eyes in surprise. Kangoo's slap made the red-haired boy gasp. His face tilted to one side, bewildered. Listening to his teammate grumble and not understanding what the hell he was being slapped by the kid in front of him, he fell over. That guy had a swollen cheek and glanced over in confusion, trying to explain, but was roughly slapped again by Kangoo and his eyes exploded. Tesu stared, looking at Kangoo repeatedly slapping the red hair without blinking. His hands worked at full capacity without stopping, causing the scumbag's teammate to not be able to hold back anymore and rushed to help. Making Kangoo frown slightly in discomfort, turning back to look when the guy chased to the area where the sword had magical power, preparing to slash down. The leader activated the power of the destructive black hole, unleashed the god Tathagata, crushed the insolent guy's intestines, and sent him flying dozens of meters away, crushing an entire piece of rock and soil. His eyes were white with pain, his mouth opened wide, spitting out a lot of water, groaning and then humiliatingly kneeling on the ground. The red hair was lying not far away, angrily gritting her teeth and climbing, when a great force pulled her head up in pain. Kangoo crouched down to face his blood-stained face, using his cold, effortless eyes, slowly asking where you got your magic power. Hearing that, the expression on his face stiffened. How the hell did he know about this? For the crime of asking one thing and answering another, Kangoo decisively slammed his red hair to the ground, making it clear that he had no right to speak here. He lifted up the red hair and coldly asked again, but the answer he received was still no. His face was beaten until it was disfigured, but he still stubbornly refused to confess. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly felt the air around him being pressed down. His whole body was pushed into a dark place, facing a strange three-eyed kneeling with a long snout. The power of fear made him see the monster's hand slowly grasping his head, directly sending terror into his eyes. He screamed loudly and fell to the ground, constantly dragging himself backwards, continuously screaming out the two words president in fear. The president doesn't understand the meaning of being a Kangoo. The teammate in the corner of the tree on the other side saw that it was okay, immediately raised his voice and shouted at Chiho to shut up, used all his remaining strength to block his friend, determined not to say a word. Ah, fuck this guy, dare to interrupt Kangoo's interrogation session. A huge source of energy rose from his body. He lightly flicked his hand and threw it after school in the middle of the talkative guy, making him gasp. Her mouth bled and she lost consciousness. Having finished dealing with the pig bird, Kangoo looked down at Chiho and forced him to either say the president's name or log out immediately. Having no other choice, Chiho people trembled in terror and shouted, Anders, which is the Andros group. Then, he explained in detail. The guild master bestowed strength on the guild members through a ceremony. Tell me more clearly, Kangoo frowned. He wanted to know the details about that ceremony, but tears were already falling on Chiho's face. He kept stammering and couldn't finish speaking. Impatiently grabbing his cat's face, he immediately activated his fear power, showing Chiho that he was being held captive in the evil eye, making the poor man roar as if he was angry. He began to have violent convulsions. Dislocated blood veins appeared on his mouth, constantly foaming white, and a few weak moans rang out. Chiho's eyes suddenly turned strangely upside down. He cried and sobbed, then spat out a mouthful of bright red blood, spitting right in front of Kangoo. Before he could get any valuable information, he died, making him extremely uncomfortable. Looking bitterly at the corpse lying on the ground, Kangoo secretly guessed that the Andrews Society had placed a curse on its members. As long as the subject mentioned the ritual, it would immediately be activated. Are you Kangoo? While he was lost in speculation, Tessu's loud voice rang out, making him reluctant to answer the story. At that time, the little thief also crawled up and looked around in confusion, thinking he was in paradise. But heaven doesn't have two guys like this. Where are my beautiful angels? Tessu quickly cleared the idiot's mind by introducing Kangoo as the person who saved the two people's lives. Speaking of that, I thought you were supposed to be at Gate, so why are you wandering around here? Just to do a little trifle, he shrugged and calmly replied. Hearing that, Tessu realized that this god was not new, that's why Kangoo kept refusing that day. He laughed and used his big hand to frantically shake Kangoo's hand and thank him profusely, making him only laugh and groan in his head, shaking his arm just enough to break it. The little thief looked at his two loving brothers, shyly broke his head and broke his ear, and thanked Kangoo. Tessu smiled gently, not expecting Kangoo to be a high-level player, promising to pay him more in the future. Kangoo on the outside is okay and agrees, but inside he is thinking, can I let go and continue talking? Tessu withdrew her hand and rummaged in her pocket to find something, constantly saying that she didn't expect Andrus and the others to be able to use magic power. This evil deed needs to be reported to the ward immediately. Tessu pulled out a tiny phone compared to her massive body and reported the news to the Flower Army. Seeing that Kangoo seemed ignorant about this association, Tessu immediately explained that this was a group of players directly managed by the government. Just report the news and they will immediately investigate. Hearing that, Kangoo just nodded silently, stroked his chin thoughtfully and told Tessu not to report this, making both him and the thief extremely surprised. Tessu could vaguely guess Kangoo's intentions, but when he heard him say he wanted to deal with the Andrus group himself, He was still quite confused and fell into deep contemplation. But the next day he agreed to keep quiet, surprising Kangoo with his big friend's understanding. Suddenly Tessu's tall body knelt down, making Kangoo wonder what was going on. Tessu used her starry eyes to look at him, vowing to always obey Kangoo's every command. What the hell is this situation? He's so fucking speechless. Tessu is still eloquently expressing her admiration for Kangoo, the heroism is just visible. In the movie, as a movie buff he admired so much, slamming his hand on the ground. Tessu respectfully kneeled on one knee, expressing her wish to participate in this journey, vowing to go with him to the ends of the earth. I know this big brother is a bit addicted to movies. I thought I was watching a romantic movie. Kangoo's facial muscles couldn't help but twitch a few times. This friend's face, filled with nothingness, looked like a bewildered Balak in hell. Little thief Taehyun saw Tessu expressing her admiration, and immediately met someone 90 degrees who continuously shot and thanked Kangoo. He knew he was just a useless kid with little talent, but he was willing to sacrifice his life for him to take revenge on. Kangoo didn't understand what that long association meant, so the kid immediately explained it to him. That's the group of thieves, so he shut his mouth and licked his wounds. He said the robbers weren't good at handling damage and blocking attacks. In short, they were a bunch of useless people who were shunned by everyone, saying that every time Kangoo saw him, he always had such a pitiful begging appearance. Taehyun's eyes were filled with tears because of his sad fate and was immediately picked up by Tessu. As naturally as a fly, he said, "You don't have to cry. Let's form a team of 3 soldiers. We'll both repay Kangoo and have more teammates, instead of letting the male lead bend his back and carry 2 weights, right?" When Taehyun heard his big brother say that, his face suddenly turned red and his eyes were filled with tears. Anyone who didn't know would have thought he was filming a romantic movie. With a trembling hand placed on his chest, Taehyun knew that he was now just 1,000-pound weight, so he wanted to go home and practice more. Unexpectedly, this kid was so understanding when Tessu sadly looked towards Taehyun while he was screaming at him, promising to find them again when he was stronger. That courage touched Tessu's heart, so his father praised him for being a real man. Witnessing that cold, bloody brotherly love movie left Kangoo speechless, silently cursing in his head that these 2 guys had lost their damn minds. After Tessu's encouragement to the station, the thief again met the 180 team saying goodbye. The 2 bros had finished dealing with a young man. The problem now was what to do with this bear Tessu. First, let's ask what level this idiot is and then decide what to do. Unexpectedly, he is at level 12 and just awakened for the second time not long ago. Sounds like something. So what about the first awakening? I reached sea level for the first time, Tessu answered confidently. After that, I chose to hunt to win the level. Kangoo immediately nodded in appreciation, his interest also starting to increase, curious about the level of the second awakening. Tessu smiled brightly and said the 2 words "a level," making Kangoo's heart flutter. This guy is no different. It's so big and has so much potential. With that level, Tessu can join any guild, but he criticizes her because her heart is already directed elsewhere. Hearing that, Kangoo was surprised, and at the same time quite curious about Tessu's choice. Suddenly he clenched his fist. His eyes were fierce and filled with enthusiasm. He raised his finger and said, "Oh Kangoo, I chose you. This enthusiastic appearance is exactly like Dad's. Could it be that these 2 guys are twins coming out of the same oven?" Looking at Tessu laughing cheerfully in front of him, Kangoo's mind began to have his own calculations. Tessu has reached a high level in her second awakening, and will definitely have the ability to reach even higher levels in the next awakenings. In addition, Sella is also preparing for her second awakening, thinking she can put the 2 of them in the same group. Kangoo immediately agreed to take Tessu in, causing him to howl with joy and ask for the leader's phone number so that he could contact anyone who dared to touch my brother and his face would be smashed. The easygoing Kangoo entered Sella's phone number and said there was something he wanted to ask Tessu for help with. He caught his twinkling, close eyes, told him to stay away from her, it was too creepy, and handed the phone back to Tessu. Kangoo explained that he wanted the 2 of them to team up and destroy the virtual world together. He didn't object at all, but seemed quite happy when he learned that Sela was a healing type. Because it's easier to find people with fighting ability, having healing from the beginning is better for Tetsu's plan to create a very strong team. Quickly save Kangu's name in your contacts as Big Daddy, but I misread it as Big Brother. Everything has been resolved, so Kangu is ready to go to Andrus Guild. The thug that Kangu sent flying to the tree branch was still unconscious. After artificial respiration by strangulation, Kangu successfully woke him up without having to go beetle. As soon as he woke up, the goose was brutally interrogated. He struggled frantically, but was overwhelmed by the overwhelming murderous aura, so he obediently nodded so he loosened his grip. The guy fell to the ground and coughed, trying to breathe in air. Tetsu glanced over and overheard that the other guy's name was Chan-ho. Without wasting any more time, Kangu went straight to the point. Why is it necessary to capture players alive and not kill them? Yet Chan-ho didn't answer. He pursed his lips tightly. Sweat continued to flow down his cheeks. And only after a while did he squeeze out 3 words that I don't remember. This guy dares to be rude. He definitely gave Chan-ho a shot in the head like a soccer ball. Who in Vietnam heard the soldier's voice and commented to Tom. He was in pain, covered his face and fell to the ground. Then Kangu grabbed the bloody head and asked, "Do you remember now or do you have to do it again?" Not wanting to fill his mouth with onions like his teammates, Chan-ho fearfully confessed that the reason he had to keep the players alive was because they would become sacrifices. After speaking, his face turned pale with worry and tension, waiting for Kangu's verdict. I saw his face as dark as a dog's lobe. The anger on his body gradually dissipated somewhat, knocking Chan-ho down on his face. Thinking this crazy guy wanted to toy with him, Kangu suddenly thought of Sela's bastard brother. That day he also intended to force her to hand over to Anders. Suddenly he flashed a strange smile, grabbed Chan-ho who was pale-faced, pressed his hideous face close to him. His eyes were as insidious as a demon, and hissed in a high-pitched voice, I have something to do. I want to miss you." That night, in a deserted alley, a few ground rats lurked in the corner, watching a man with a bruised cheek quietly walking away pulling a suitcase. Stopping, a scream rang out and a bright light appeared, scaring the rats away. A guy with long hair held a flashlight and pointed it straight at him, wondering if it was Chan-ho. That bloody and bruised face made him unable to identify who this was. He only remembered that this guy often went with the red-haired guy, so he asked where that arrogant guy was. Longhair heard Chan-ho say the other guy was dead and opened his mouth, thinking he heard wrong. He remembered that we only hunted at D-class gates, but it was a bit confusing to die. Avoiding the eyes of the long-haired man, Chan-ho quickly pushed the suitcase in front of him, but he continued to frantically question him and refused to let go. The hand holding the suitcase tightened. Chan-ho turned his head away and stammered that they accidentally went with a high-ranking guy. Thanks to the red hair's sacrifice they were able to defeat him. The person in the suitcase is that guy. Longhair used a flashlight to check the goods and found that the voltage was stable, so I was quite satisfied. But the dirty look on Chan-ho's face made him quite concerned, making this guy quickly cover it up because his teammate had just died, so his emotions were a bit chaotic. The long-haired lady slammed her suitcase shut and mumbled, "What the hell is chaos? The fewer people the better. Thanks to this sacrifice, everyone will receive divine favors, and you will receive all the magic power. Why do you look so gloomy on your face? You should feel grateful, right?" Seeing that Chan-ho still didn't answer, he was forced to come forward and tease him. Maybe he killed his teammates to monopolize magic power. Chan-ho couldn't stand it anymore and turned away, shouted in a loud voice and said whatever he wanted, took the sacrifice and pushed his mother away to make the water clear. Chan-ho then took it upon himself to run away, leaving Longhair confused as to whether the bastard was really sad about the other guy's death. Chan-ho didn't care, he just threw his legs behind his neck and ran, his face showing terror, wanting to get out of here as quickly as possible. The market is still crowded with Longhair, slowly pulling the suitcase into a door. If you have blessings but don't know how to enjoy them, you're a fool. He silently pulled the sacrifice into a large gathering with clouds of blazing firelight and 8 hooded men standing on both sides. As soon as he arrived, he was punished for being late. He immediately announced that the members were in trouble because a high-ranking player was blocking their way. But the leader doesn't care who dies, as long as there's a sacrifice. The other guy, as obedient as a dog, pulled out the suitcase and carried the sacrifice onto the altar, while those below roared their oath of absolute worship. Everything is going according to the Crow's Beak's plan. It's been almost a year since he transformed, but every time the ceremony is performed, it's always so exciting. The followers always increase exponentially and everyone craves great power. He was satisfied by granting magic power, so the guild grew more and more prosperous. Starting with gleeful laughter, that guy pulled down his mask to reveal a strange face, neither a ghost nor a ghost. It was time for the ceremony and he excitedly asked his subordinates to prepare magic stones. They immediately roared Great Andros in response. One guy opened the chest at the foot of the altar to reveal thousands of magic stones. With his insatiable desire for power, his blackening speed will increase, and he will soon become a true devil. The leader smiled and asked whose turn it was to receive the favor today. He learned that that person had refused the ritual, making him a bit startled by this situation. The apostles below were whispering. Everyone wanted to beg for today's blessing on behalf of Chan-ho, who didn't know that. Suddenly a stick hit the ground, making everyone scared and quickly knelt down. Hearing the president's warning, if you don't do it, don't ask for food. If you want, bring the sacrifice up here and continue talking. He also manipulated everyone's psychology by using his power. Without me, you wouldn't have any magic power. His eyes lit up with insatiable desire, immediately declaring that today's ownerless sacrifice would belong to him. The ceremony officially began. He shouted loudly, causing the crowd to listen. No one dared to stand up and protest against the Supreme President. Use the staff to smash the magic stone to release energy, activating a magical array built on the altar. With these magic stones, he can grant grace a few more times. His power will increase by absorbing the magic power spilling through that crack. At first it was just a tiny crack that appeared in the air, then it gradually cracked open and sent down a huge source of magic power. The leader looked up with lustful, infatuated eyes, wanting to immediately dive in and absorb it, but that was too dangerous, so an intermediate step was needed. That's why he was close to the sacrifices, so that they could absorb magic power for him, then absorb the blood of those corpses, thus being able to absorb the purest magic power. Just like how he was transferring all the magic power from the crack into the guy lying on this table. Wishing you a peaceful journey, poor guy. After a while, this guy is still not dead and absorbs magic power faster and faster. Making the guild leader happy, the longer the sacrifice lasted, the more magic it absorbed, causing him to drink blood. Pressing on the object's head, his eyes turned white and his whole body convulsed slightly. But he was still able to withstand the abundant magic power from 5 to 15 times higher than normal. The president was so happy that he counted to 20 to 30, then 50, waiting for the item to roar pitifully, then knead and suck blood like a vampire. Yet after waiting forever and counting, nothing happened. That guy was still completely motionless on the altar. The smile on his face gradually disappeared, replaced by an unprecedented worry. Dumbfounded at the sight of magical power like a flood washing into the body of the sacrifice, but he still lived as long as a leech. What is it like to die like this? His legs wobbled, he still looked helplessly at the weak light of the magic stones, his mouth shouting stop, stop. Please. Hachimalagu saw the high-ranking president at the border screaming wildly, and his followers gradually showed confusion. At that time, the man on the altar became angry. His face contorted in a terrifying way, and then he let out an earth-shattering scream. The whole temple seemed to shake with that cry, and at the same time, the mana in the exhausted magic stone exploded and closed the crack. The president with a yellow anemone lunged in front of the altar like a fool when he realized that his magic power had disappeared in a moment. While furiously scratching the floor, the man lying on the altar suddenly jumped up and excitedly said, "My parameters have increased by 20 points." The president couldn't hide his surprise, and he looked like he was about to fall apart. What the hell is going on? Okangu was extremely excited after the magic power suction just now, and suddenly he was lying still and became stronger like this. With a smile, he asked the president kneeling below if he could do it again. Kangoo grinned and pretended to be cute, begging it to be just one more time. The president's whole body trembled. He had never suffered such great humiliation in his life. The anger erupted into howls and screams, making the 500 followers scared to death and not daring to cough. Green beans and pennywort, you son of a bitch. The president cursed Kangoo with a frequency as loud as the loudspeakers at the bar near Tom's house. Just cursing is not enough, you have to fight with luck to extinguish this anger. He launched a fireball straight at Kangoo, but he easily dodged to the side to escape the huge explosion. If they had hit him, his feet would have been cold. Seeing that this chicken also had some bravery, Kangoo kindly complimented him. But no matter how much you praise or criticize, you can't extinguish the president's anger. The crazy man rushed forward, summoning fireballs, and then drove Kangoo into the center of the peace sphere. Waving the staff in his hand sent them rushing straight towards him, creating an explosion with terrible destructive power. However, I don't understand why the balls bounced back, creating an earthquake of smoke and fire. The president stiffened and looked forward to see Kangoo towering through the smoke and dust. With the power of Iron Wall activated from magic power, he is covered by a layer of armor that blocks all physical or magical attacks. Kangoo's half of his face, which was not covered, smirked evenly, admitting that it was really convenient to have magic power. Doesn't that sound harsh? But the president gritted his teeth and knew he couldn't win by playing solo, so he decided to change his strategy to use numbers to suppress Kangoo. He turned back and ordered the apostles to rush up to attack, but they immediately responded and rushed up without thinking, each with their hands ready to hold weapons, determined to destroy the enemy to receive divine grace. This group is not only crowded but also stupid, waiting for them to run up to the place where Kangoo has been transporting energy for 8 generations. Still using the familiar sword that grew skin from his hand, he flew straight and slashed the guy in front of him in the blink of an eye. After that, there was a series of random stabbings and slashes, and wherever Kangoo ran, blood was shed because these useless people had no chance to compare with him. Rushing away as if there was no one there, the only sound in the quiet room was the screams and the pouring blood. Kangoo only stopped when the president's voice roared, "Get the fuck out of the way so your dad can take action." The apostles looked over there and groaned, "President Du Dokyeon, please save me." He walked back with a grin and kept mumbling to let Dokyeon show him what true strength is. Kneel down before the fire that can burn the original life. Dokyeon burst out laughing in excitement, releasing a fireball that fit in the palm of his hand. He confidently shouted out the power of hell. Kangoo looked at the ball in his hand for a few seconds, then turned around and laughed. Before he could get angry at being looked down upon, a bright flame reflected on Dokyeon's pupils. The flickering firelights shined straight, causing the smugness on his face to gradually disappear. Because right in front of Dokyeon was the real fire of hell burning, the tiny fireball in his hand was truly exhausted. Dumbfounded, speechless, his face turned pale, sweat poured down his body. His body began to tremble. What is that thing? The hellfire emitting demonic energy was getting closer and closer, but Dokyeon was so surprised that he just stood there. Why would something so absurd happen? His eyes were about to fall out in fear. Looking at those devil-like eyes, Dokyeon was sure there was no way he could win, so he had to quickly think of another way. Suddenly, this guy's head started to speed up unexpectedly. The hand that created the fireball trembled for a few times, then suddenly clenched his fist to extinguish it. The guy jumped down so quickly that Kangoo understood what crazy trick this idiot was playing. Oh, this is the identity of Mr. Andros Vy Dai. Oh. Now, with both hands in the air, Dokyeon clenched his ass and screamed with a high-pitched voice expressing infinite respect. Damn, this guy is an A-list actor. His rice paper flips make Kangoo blush. He can't adapt to that actor. Dokyeon was still enthusiastically composing himself, clasping his hands and bowing his back earnestly, saying, "You are the embodiment of salvation and will rule this whole world." That sharp declaration hit the believers' ears straight. They are confused and don't understand what's going on. What are you guys doing? Hurry up and do the ceremony. Dokyun saw the Kangoo following him and was happy. A bright smile appeared on his distorted face. His ecstatic performance made the Kangoo find it interesting, immediately turning on the flying mode with the power of the sky, causing the remaining apostles to kneel at his feet. Dokyun didn't know that the god knew how to fly. His face turned blank again and he looked up hesitantly, seeing Kangoo was extremely enjoying the feeling of being the main actor. I am Andros, the great king of fire, lord of hell, demon king of the top 1 server on earth. For those who are happy, there must be others who are in trouble. Dokyun continuously banged his head on the floor and praised him as if he worshipped and admired him very much. But the Kangoo's eyes suddenly turned strangely sinister, and in a cold voice ordered Dokyun to chase all his subordinates away. I have something to confide in private with you. After the believers left the Dark Temple, only 2 people remained, the kangaroo sitting on the altar. God personally investigated this merchant. He also obediently knelt on the ground, mouthing the words Great Devil Andros, 2 words Great Man Andros. He couldn't bear to hear the denial, so the Kangoo grabbed his collar, his mouth twitching knowing that it wasn't Andros that was talking so much. Dokyun felt silent and then immediately shouted back, so who is he really? Hold your mouth. Kangoo grabbed the man's collar, pressed his face down with a murderous intent and threatened him, and answered rudely, he would break all his teeth right now. He was so scared that he turned pale and opened his mouth, only saying yes, sweet yes. Where did the person learn how to create acne scars with black magic? Kangoo used his eyes to turn into bullets and shot straight at Dokyun, making his limbs suddenly tremble, and honestly answered that he could do it because he heard a lecture from a stranger. Fearfully told about that fateful day, a man wearing a devil mask approached him and said that if you wanted eternal life, you should follow devilism. Whoa, just hearing about 2 requests made my blood boil. Kangoo gave him a slap and knocked him down. He's so big that he doesn't even know what's right or wrong. Now that guy says people eat shit and people eat it too. Dokyun lying flat on the floor, he felt angry and said it was because that guy was too strong. I had tried my best. In the blink of an eye, Dokyun's entire guild was inundated by that person threatening to either do as he said, or die. At that time, I was about to be strangled to death and had no other choice but to accept and follow his orders. Remembering that terrible memory, Dokyun still couldn't help but panic, swearing that he didn't know anything. That was also the last time Dokyun met this strange guy, and after that he only received orders via email. Taking the staff and tapping Dokyun's head, it's a crime to hear this story, but I still don't understand why you would risk your life to listen to a stranger like that. Of course, because that guy was too strong. Dokyun obediently avoided Kangoo's judgmental eyes. He exhaled in boredom. Maybe he was forced to do it from the beginning, but the sweet temptation of kneeling down made him fall. Get involved in those rituals without realizing it. Kangoo thought hard and couldn't figure out who it was. Even though the demon sect has not been recognized as an official sect, their influence is terrible. This matter absolutely cannot be taken lightly, so he asked Dokyun in a low voice to quickly send out a few emails containing orders. So why did that general give him a letter? What's the matter? Dokyun simply replied that there was only this one letter. Kangoo did not pursue it anymore and opened it immediately. The most notable of which is the sentence, accept the ability to kneel and become a kneeler to recruit as many players as possible, which made Kangoo's ass itch and click his teeth a few times. Do you bastards want to turn this world into hell? Holding the letter in his hand, he angrily asked, is there anyone else who can receive it besides you? His sweaty face said, I don't know, making the pretty Kangoo stand up in doubt. Such an important plan must have had many people involved, unless the masked person was an idiot to go all in on this idiot Dokyun. Boldly grabbing Dokyun's collar, he became angry when he thought his beautiful world was being threatened by a group of crazy, mindless followers. Activating the power of fear on Dokyun, he let out 3 strong commandments. First, we must investigate him about demonism. Second, we must not perform any more sacrificial rituals. And third, we must keep what happened today a secret. The poor president could only cry and scream, answering no again and again like a machine. The more Kangoo spoke, the more scared Dokyun became. tears streaming down his face as if he had never cried in his entire life. The month of being a ghost had passed and he didn't know why he still had to meet such a disgusting demon. As soon as he was released, he threw his legs behind him and ran. He had to immediately kick some balut seeds to release bad luck. Kangoo behind him was still busy thinking about how to handle the trouble caused by the Undris group. The number of people missing for sacrifice purposes was increasing. The government is also preparing to launch an investigation, so we have to act more cautiously. Until then, just freely control Dokyen as a henchman. The curse of fear has already attached to him, so you don't have to worry about information being leaked out. As long as he achieves his goal, he will immediately quail. Today was really hard. Kangoo sighed and sighed. His whole body was sore from fighting all day, so he had to go home and rest quickly. As soon as he opened the door with excitement, Kangoo immediately called Sella's name. However, what caught his eyes was not the sunny smile like usual, but instead was Sella's worried face. You've been diving all day without asking me a word. Do you know how worried I am? Kangoo saw 22 missed calls on the screen and confusedly explained that he was busy fighting monsters and couldn't answer the phone. Knowing that Sella was still angry about his submarine performance, he softly told her not to worry too much. I promised that next time I wouldn't do it again. Hearing that, I calmed down and suddenly my face turned red. Why are you blushing, Dad? While listening to my review, I suddenly got a pot of dog rice. To break this awkward atmosphere, Sella ran into the kitchen to prepare dinner, and Kangoo happily ordered a huge pot of kimchi soup. Knowing that this oppa would ask for that dish, Sella said that it had already been prepared, making his eyes shine like stars. He clasped his hands together and bowed in all four directions. Meeting someone so beautiful and lovely like this, how worthy it is to spend 10,000 years in hell. The joy was doubled when hearing Sella happily announce that she had awakened for the second time. Kangoo was stunned and looked at her proudly, leaning forward to tell the story. The big round eyes lit up when announcing that they had reached level B with the light blessing skill. Sounds cool, right? Nothing else, Kangoo happily followed, thinking about having Sella team up with Tessa, a healing mage with high-level skills and a tank. This perfect combination will make them much stronger than other teams. I hope Sella hasn't joined other guilds yet. When Kangoo asked, he found out that there were many places that wanted to invite her back. But Sella doesn't want to join those teams, she just wants to join the Kangoo team. Please God, listen to me, I'm truly the angel of my life. Even so, he couldn't let his emotions overpower his reason, so he had to say that right now you weren't suitable to go with him. To put it bluntly, if she came along, she would only add more weight and not have any experience, making Sella lower her eyes sadly. Seeing her look disappointed, Kangoo also felt a bit sorry, but immediately dismissed that thought because he couldn't relent at this important moment. Basically, Kangoo is much stronger than people of the same level. If everyone insists on following him, he won't be able to gain much experience, nor will he be able to participate in major battles. Tessu and Sella must practice more to be able to stand side by side with him in the future. Kangoo immediately asked Sella to form a team with Tessu, together to destroy low-level gates to gain experience points and level up, making her feel exhausted and reluctantly agree to discuss the matter. When he says he has more experience, we will team up and enter higher-level gates. Her heart was happy again. Sella excitedly agreed as long as she could be in a group with Kangoo in the future. He also buffed my spirit by saying that Tessu was very strong, and soon the two of them would destroy the virtual world. If you have any trouble, just call me. No matter where you are, I will rush to support. Okay, which makes Sella visibly excited. The pot of soup boiled like my determination. All problems were completely resolved. Kangoo is extremely satisfied. This is an investment. Everyone, investing in things with potential is never a loss. But when should I level up the two of them? While she was resting her chin in thought, Sella brought a pot of kimchi soup to the table, causing Kangoo's round eyes to shine brightly. The pot of soup was delicious and attractive, just like the person who cooked it. He immediately grabbed a spoon to prepare to eat it, but was stopped by Sella to scoop something else from a small pot. Tell me to eat with this dish. My eyes filled with tears as if trembling. Oh my God, isn't this flavor like instant noodles? Sella picked up the noodles and put them in the pot of soup. Each golden noodle strand mixed with the premium broth, creating an irresistibly attractive pot of kimchi noodles. In Kangoo's eyes, the pot seemed to radiate a brilliant aura. His trembling hand grabbed the tabletop and then slowly placed it on the chopsticks. His eyes became more serious than ever. You demon cult bastards. Even though I don't know who you are yet, I will definitely protect and save this world. Specifically, saving that pot of kimchi noodles for the whole family. Girls are just fleeting. Good food is the ideal true love of life. The next morning, at the player support center, which was full of busy passers-by as usual, Kangoo was quite disappointed because he had not received a C-rank player card today. The employee immediately explained that the C-rank card had magic identification stones attached to it, so it would take more time than usual. Even though Sella had warned him before, Kangoo still left in a depressed state. Stepping out, heaving a deep sigh, eyes looking lazily at the stream of people going up and down, Kangoo wondered if it seemed like he hadn't had a day of rest since returning to Earth. There was no further movement from the demon cultists, so he decided to go down to the street to solve his problems one day. He wandered among the crowd but somehow felt extremely lost, not knowing what to do to pass the time. Remember, before being dragged to hell, Kangoo's life was extremely boring, except for listening to reviews on Mr. Tom's channel, which was fun. The rest was meaningless. Even though Tom's story is still good right now, Tom's clip didn't come out in time for Kangoo to see, so he was determined to enjoy a different style. By chance, my eyes met a sign nearby. The cosmic signal had destroyed it, so why not go in there? Wow, this is a coffee shop, not a game shop. That's so good. Kangoo, just like a countryman on the street, was surprised to sit in a chair. Even the chair was this comfortable in the sugarcane grove. On the computer screen were a bunch of delicious things. Kangoo couldn't help but salivate. This is heaven. When you go to the internet store, you must immediately order the legendary combo of instant noodles and strawberry juice. The game also has to choose the hottest game to accept. Kangoo seriously studied the positions in the game, seeing that it was no different from fighting monsters in real life. After a while of hesitation, he chose the General Teemo, which is not only cute but also has quite sharp skills. Then the music in the game rang out, causing the two rice players to gasp for a moment. Their eyes and mouth kept saying, "Oh." The gameplay is also quite simple. Just kill the monster and you will get the reward. But Kangoo doesn't understand the rules, so all of AdSK's monsters are scolded by his teammates like a slap in the face. But the guy didn't understand anything, and even invited everyone to go fight with him, causing the chat to burst into tears. At that moment, instant noodles with 2 eggs were brought out. He immediately went AFK, letting them scold him whatever he wanted. Everything becomes less important when the food reaches his mouth. Kangoo slurps and picks up the noodles and praises them for when his teammates get into a fight. People keep spamming messages asking for help and cursing why you took my Elsu and went AFK. This guy begged you. I'll take care of you. Don't go AFK. But he still didn't care to pick up the pickled radish, ignoring the threats to rip off the account he had just set up a few minutes ago. Because he was immersed in the joy of eating and drinking, nothing could stop this burning passion. After finishing the bowl of noodles, he had to take a sip of stin to get it right. Kangoo told himself that from now on, he would have to pay more attention to his strokes. Suddenly a sad defeat sound rang out on Kangoo's phone before he looked at the screen and realized his bodyguard was dead. Thinking about this Elsu dog, an angry curse rang out, causing him to choke on his sperm. It just so happened that it sounded like he was being scolded. Raising his hand to wipe his mouth, Kangoo gently glanced at the source of the scream, grumbling and telling his daughter to keep her mouth shut. Feeling bitter about losing the 4th bronze rank, the red-haired man wearing a cap angrily cursed at the Kangoo-faced guy, looking at something eye-rolling now. Suddenly her eyes landed on Kangoo's computer screen. Oh boy, isn't this the Elsu arm I've been hunched over for a while now? She burst out laughing haha, making him confused but still looked in the direction that girl walked towards him. Seeing the pile of plates scattered haphazardly on his table, the red hair seemed to be injected with chicken blood and said in a loud voice, "If you're smart, Get out quickly before your sister gets hot. But Kangoo still sat there, making the red-haired man unbearably angry, frowning and thinking that this bastard really dared to look down on him. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became, rushing forward to give Kangoo a slap in the face. But he gently dodged her to the side, causing the red hair to widen her eyes in surprise, her arms still stiff in mid-air. Seeing that, Kangoo kindly reminded him to quickly return to camp and not stay here and bite innocent people anymore. Not only did she not say a word back, she also swung her hand to grab him again but still missed. Not giving up, he switched to another hand but still failed. Looking at Kangoo's unmoving eyes, the red hair still didn't understand what the problem was. Then suddenly the air around him seemed to be choked. He refused to sit still anymore and stood up. As fast as a tornado, he continued to dodge the red hair's attacks, his flexible body continuously running away from her lightning-fast speed. Red hair also proved that she was not mediocre. Many times she almost touched Kangoo but then narrowly lost her prey. The cat-and-mouse game went on like that for a long time, and finally the redhead couldn't hold back any longer and clenched his fists, stopping in an attack position. A few rays of energy still flashed from her fist. She finally stopped but was extremely wary and asked in a cold voice, "Who are you? Are you the hunting dog of Mia's group?" Fortunately, Kangoo is not the one who was forced to act as his surname. Even though the Mia group is also part of the 5 largest server groups, this honest guy immediately refused. Yet the red-haired mother still clenched her hands in discomfort, determined not to believe that a strong person like Kangoo would tickle people who don't belong to any group. Making him run out of words to curse, he asked her which guild she belonged to. Hearing that, the red-haired girl smiled brightly, saying that she was afraid she would lose her beauty because she belonged to the most notorious guild in Korea, the Hong Association. I left behind and I accidentally said something. The red hair almost lost my mind. Luckily I didn't let my mouth go too far or else it would have been a big mistake. As soon as he regained his composure, he discovered that the guy had already sneaked away to pay, his blood rushing straight to his brain and roaring loudly. Kangoo let out a deep breath because this ant was really annoying. She was planning to cheat and then she was discovered. That disappointed look on his face made the red-haired mother upset again, rushing over to question him. "You don't believe that an A-level person doesn't belong to any association? If you even joke around, I'll break my jaw." It wasn't until Kangoo had to put the D-level fake awakening card in her face that she stopped shouting loudly. It's true that these two faces are exactly the same. I'm speechless. I still can't believe that this guy is a new player. Kangoo put the card in his pocket and acted angry. "Please act like a senior. You almost killed me." This psychological manipulation was so effective. The red-haired person was sweating coldly and yet he couldn't defeat a new player. Was that person really in the D range? Kangoo took advantage of that moment to brush his ass and walk out the door, leaving the redhead behind with 1,000 questions about why and in a confused mood. It's not clear what strange thought she had in mind, but looking at this unpleasant expression, Tom guessed that it wasn't anything good. Stepping out of the drawing shop in a gloomy state, Kangoo's eyes were filled with sadness as he opened his hand to his fingers. Even though his abilities were gone, the fighting reflexes of many years of experience were still there. However, Kangoo did not expect to meet an equal so soon. She moved as fast as a leopard, especially the last blow. In a split second of inattention, she disappeared from my sight, and I was almost strangled to death by her. Thank God for supporting me. Now that I think about it, my heart is still pounding. He rubbed his chest to reassure himself that he wouldn't see that girl again, when suddenly his eyes spotted something. At the same time, outside a building, an arm was reaching out to open the door stealthily like a thief. Suddenly a pair of white shoes jumped onto the window sill and the red-haired girl did an acrobatic jump down below with her face extremely tense. She stood on the air conditioning unit, cautiously observed the surroundings, confirmed that no one was there, then pulled out a device with 999 roses engraved on it, pressed the button on it and brought it to her ear. Leaning against the wall, waiting to connect with human resources, it took half an hour for someone to pick up the phone. This dangerous-looking guy wearing glasses is Park Yun-hoo, a very effective henchman of Chae Eun-do. the president of the Red Rose Society. Or that same red-haired motherfucker. It's just that she looks a bit young, but she's also destined to have a mother in the fake awakening village. She suspected Kangoo of being on the demon cult side, so she called Da. Even though she checked his player card, that suspicious gesture made her suspicious. Chae-eun-do told his subordinates some basic information about the other guy, and at the same time expressed his doubts about the D card, because it was not equipped with a magic stone, so it could be easily faked. Yunhoo on the other end of the line immediately jumped in and said, "Low-level evil people often go around killing players of the same level." Chae-eun-do was so angry that she lost her words before she finished speaking. He coldly told Kangoo that he was completely level D, because he could neutralize and predict all of her moves. The subordinate held his tongue for a few seconds and then shouted, "The president's shape-shifting and permutation skill had never been rivaled before. How the hell could an ordinary evildoer have that ability?" This is also Chae-eun-do's biggest question. Even though she has fought many demons, no one has ever been able to keep up with her speed. But that bastard has flexible reflexes and the same speed as the president. With his Viper level, could he possibly be the manager, or the leader? The new judgment made Chae-eun-do give Da a like, waiting all this time to say a sentence that sounded okay. Her hands clenched when she thought that the evil cult was starting to act. She ordered her superiors below quickly find out more information about Kong Ji-yu. It's so unfair to the male lead. I thought he was worshipping paganism, but I didn't expect that he was the one holding the head of thousands of demons. His eyes were dark as if he was contemplating something. Whether he belongs to a cult or not is still unclear, but looking at the button in her hand, she can be sure of one thing. Just now she was defeated, and Kong Ji-yu on the other side was also shocked when he discovering that a button was flying away. He was upset when he thought he couldn't avoid the last group of attackers. Even though they were in two places, both of their eyes were extremely cold, murderous aura surrounded their souls, when they realized that the other person was actually stronger than them. Cheon-do clenched his hands into fists thinking about a possibility if Kong Ji-yu was really a newbie D who was capable of fighting such a bull. Cheon-do's position as a high-level player will be seriously threatened. After a while, he returns to reflect on the bitter defeat in the game. The brass ball hit her in the face, causing her to slam her hand down on the table in anger. The hysteria broke out so strongly that her face turned red and her teeth clenched together. Kong-goo's shirt button was left with only scattered pieces. Following the sound of cursing, "You son of a bitch. Oh Kong Ji-yu. I swear I will find and kill you." The god Kong Ji-yu stood outside the hair salon, not knowing why in the midday sun he got goosebumps. The next morning, Kong Ji-yu, as soon as he got his C-class card, immediately headed towards the gate in Mok-dong. According to the information on the leaflet, it seems like this is where the brain lives, but it doesn't matter too much because whatever it is, I'll deal with it quickly. While he was burning with fighting spirit, he was stopped by a few policemen. Today, he only accepted to play in teams. If anyone wanted to play solo, go away. Because the brain leader has appeared in the dungeon, the headquarters does not allow you to go alone, brother. Oh lala, just after leveling up, a boss appeared. Today, Kong Ji-yu, I'm the luckiest person. That hot news also gradually spread thanks to the word-of-mouth effect. The players were talking about whether they should go inside or not. Gate C was completely different. Kong Ji-yu glanced around and saw that the fake awakener's weapons looked much better, and security was also tightened. This is the biggest problem, because if you want to monopolize the dungeon, you have to go alone. So now you have to use some way to get into me. The awakened people around him were filled with enthusiasm to advance, while others were afraid to enter. A lot of hesitation and anticipation covers everyone, so why don't I add a little madness here? Kong Ji-yu flashed a sinister smile, his eyes glowing red like an evil demon, preparing to use 3 stick cards to deceive people. Silently channeling the energy behind a coward's back, quietly pushing energy into him, then activating the power of madness. Just that little trick is enough to excite people. His eyes suddenly opened wide, blaming himself and his teammates for being cowards, causing some of his teammates to shyly look over and ask, "What's wrong with you?" The humiliating past of being bullied seemed to come alive in him. At that time, even though he wanted to resist the human force, he couldn't help but imagine the scene of revenge against them in his mind. Life is like hell on earth. At that moment the gate appeared like a savior. The dream of eliminating evil came true. How happy he was when he finally found the truth, could hold his head high and live without having to bow to anyone. Why be discouraged just because of monsters? He suddenly roared loudly, spitting everywhere. His pupils seemed about to pop out, and blue veins appeared on his face, distorted by anger. Seeing that, the two teammates were sweating profusely. Wow, is this the most cowardly guy in the group? While they weren't paying attention, Kong Ji-yu secretly patted his pink hair on the shoulder, causing him to immediately roar and say that there were so many of his brothers that they would win if they used meat to give birth to people. The short-haired girl nearby thought this guy was crazy, but a few seconds later she shouted that she must avenge her sister, causing the scar-faced guy to shake a bit. Gritting her teeth, she thought she couldn't stay this weak forever. Okay, he roared like a loudspeaker, determined to make the monsters kneel at his feet. So the whole awakened group pretended to be buffed with 1000% more power and howled wildly like a few multi-level presidents determined to get rich. One guy raised his face to the sky and declared, "The boss hunting campaign of 500 brothers officially began." The chaotic scene made the two guards freeze. Did they just do drugs or something? At that moment, two players came and thrust the card at the security guard's face, demanding to open the gate. With the spirit of killing the boss rising to the sky, hundreds of people rushed in, causing unprecedented congestion. The guard who saw this for the first time couldn't help but be confused and quickly contacted his superiors for assistance, not knowing that someone had just passed by here. Kong Ji-yu took advantage of the chaotic situation outside and used the power of the sky to successfully break inside. Seeing everyone unanimously determined like that, it's really touching. So I'll take all the rewards here, ha ha ha. Leisurely stepping through the teleportation gate, Kong Ji-yu entered a vast desert with swirling winds and sand on all four sides, completely different from the tropical forest at the other two gates. Not to mention the scorching heat makes finding the boss even more difficult. Suddenly remembering that he had to go to Gate C now, he had to look at the system board to see that his magic power had reached 53, which was more fun than Tet. Immediately jumping over several cliffs to climb the highest mountain, landing strongly like a bullfrog, Kong Ji-yu activated his exploration power. Two giant magical eyes that covered the entire sky appeared and in an instant covered the entire desert. The images of the brains gradually appeared like Sony's. Kong Ji-yu saw a few people hiding behind cliffs in the middle of the desert. The overload of information sent in made Kong Ji-yu extremely painful, but he was determined not to give up the search. Quickly scrolling past the stupid brains, I suddenly saw a brain with an extremely massive body surrounded by an ugly harem. Quickly using the probe to take a close-up of the brain, Kong Ji-yu bet that it was indeed the boss he was looking for. The prey had appeared, so he immediately disconnected the connection. The problem now was to deal with all the soldiers next to it. The author immediately provided a solution for him by letting the players rush in like a broken nest. Kong Ji-yu sat up high and laughed, intending to use them as pawns, then went to behead the leader of the brains. Thinking it was just a show, Kong Ji-yu disappeared in the blink of an eye, speeding straight to where the boss and his accomplices wanted to lure the bearded soldiers to where the players were gathering. Bend down to land on the ground and combine internal energy. Kong-gu's hand rushed up and gathered a large amount of force back into him and quickly turned into a large spear for him. Use the supporting leg and spin the spear like creating a tornado until it is completely shaped. Kong Ji-yu used both hands to grab its handle and rose high, still throwing it straight forward with all his might, hitting the boss right in the chest. It fell back with its gaping mouth open, causing the system to appear and say that Dungeon Boss C had been defeated. The experience points awarded to the person with the most kills increased by 4 levels at once. I thought he was so happy, but it turned out he was still frozen. Unbelievable. Just a simple shot killed the Seagate boss. Kong Ji-yu intended to use that attack to distract the boss. Who would have thought that it was remote, which always made him quite nervous, looking at the soldiers frantically scratching around the leader's body and doubting life. Cunning Boss C was a waste. causing Kong Ji-yu to check the system again to be sure. Then I realized it wasn't that the boss was weak, it was just his own ability that was too strong. However, for so long, he had been stuck hunting. Now, realizing that his strength was so overwhelming, Kong Ji-yu decided to change his hunting strategy. The minions were busy, down there heard a loud noise behind them and all turned to look. My jaw dropped when I saw the confused player standing right in front of me. Kong Ji-yu curled his lips into a half-smile, with eyes filled with contempt. Come on in, honey. Being underestimated made the crazy minds scream and rush straight towards the enemy, but Kong Ji-yu leisurely spread his arms as if he was the only one who accepted everything. Seeing that the brains had chased to where Kong Ji-yu was still smiling with delight, the murderous aura suddenly rose up. It was time to wait seriously. We only saw a flash of light across our bodies. Kong Ji-yu gently passed by with the blade emitting suspicious magic. The monsters' faces turned pale when they saw the cuts on their bodies gradually spreading and the energy inside continuously gushing out. Then the internal organs shot out, accompanied by several sharp sword blades, slashing them bloody right behind Kong Gu's back. Kong Ji-yu enjoyed the effect of a devastating attack of the blade's power with only a small portion of his own magic power. The notification system exploded, but he only paid attention to the newly acquired Earth Sword skill with much greater damage. The group of stupid minds surrounding the corpses of his fellow humans, seeing those pitiful, confused faces, made him unable to resist wanting to test his new skill on them. And then he felt so bad, brother. Kong Ji-yu laughed and injected a bit of energy from the tip of his small fingernail onto the ground, forming circles of different sizes with him as the center and then gradually spreading to the brain. Of course, these brainless guys don't know anything. Their arms and legs kicked wildly. The blade below immediately floated up and pierced both legs and feet. They were like beaten dogs, not caring about anything, turning tail and running away, not caring where the blade came from. So a system of thousands of blades is activated at the same time, piercing and scarring, cutting horizontally and biting vertically. The more chaotic it is, the faster it dies. Even if you run away, you cannot escape the scythe of death. After dying a desert island, Kangoo recognized that this skill was okay. But one shot could enlighten dozens of animals at once. He activated his insatiable hunger to absorb magic power, calling on them to quickly spread out from the ground to a feast of meat and brains that only increased by a paltry 2 points. Now Kangoo understands the saying that the higher the level, the more difficult it is to increase stats. Although the leveling speed is still stable, Kangoo's ambition is very big. Scoop up everything here and collect the energy that is absorbed through a controlled place. A few hours later, the awakened group also arrived, thinking it was a big game for everyone to admire, but they couldn't even see the footprints of a brain. Some people were angry and thought they had been tricked because in addition to meeting a brain running away, the rest seemed to have evaporated from the server. There were traces of a battle on the ground, but Boss's body was nowhere to be found. Why the hell are you fighting these days? Go home and get some rest. Although there were still people who wanted to stay a little longer, they were all rejected by the majority because even such a crowd still couldn't find anything. Kangoo quietly hid behind the cliff, breathing a sigh of relief because his crazy power was still in effect. When no one was paying attention, he mixed in with the crowd to return. As soon as they stepped out of the gate, the players immediately became angry and grabbed the guards, asking if they were bluffing or seeing any monsters. Kangoo, who was preparing to play cards, opened his eyes wide when he saw a group of soldiers in red uniforms standing in front of him. That was the government's Huajiang squad surrounding the exit, making the players extremely unhappy. Kangoo tried to move past the crowd to get a peek. The increasingly loud whispers about the reason why Huajiang's squad appeared here suddenly fell silent when the golden shoulders of a person with high-tied silver hair entered. The beautiful but extremely serious face of the captain of Huajiang's third team, the legendary Park Hwa-an, made the crowd noisy. She stepped forward, slammed the tip of her sword down with a loud clanking sound, then glanced over. Notices about players at the wrong level are appearing more and more at Gate D. The Huajiang team will conduct random checks on players in the third stage of awakening to see if anyone overlevels here or not. And Kang Ji-yu stood behind worriedly, staring at the majestic Park Hwa-an standing above. The appearance of a serious young man like this must be very difficult to chew. Park Hwa-an reassures players that they will be checked quickly. Everyone has nothing to worry about. That's just for the other players, but for those who just messed around in the dungeon, they have to worry about the house. Having a habit of being startled, Kang Ji-yu felt embarrassed. Did he reveal his foxtail? Now is not the time for him to fight back openly when guards everywhere cannot play cards. Especially when Park Hwa-an is still standing there, you can see that she will be a very tough opponent, so don't mess with her. The urgent situation caused billions of neurons in his head to operate at full capacity, and his face sank and looked extremely gloomy. The mood was slowly dissipating when Park Hwa-an appeared, reaching out his hand to ask Kang Ji-yu to present his documents, making him startled. Profusely showing his player card, Kang Woo found himself worrying too much. It seems that Park Hwa-an has not yet discovered anything unusual. He just still needs to raise his vigilance because it seems that the cultists have already started to act. Seeing that Park Hwa-an was concentrating on examining the card, Kang Ji-yu immediately opened his mouth and said loudly, "It is truly an honor for me to be personally checked by the big boss like this."